Another candidate who's running for office for the first time. It's nice to get fresh ideas. Welcome into My State of Mind. I am Dan York. Matt Fecteau is my guest. He is a Democrat running against David Cicilline. That's right, a Democrat running against David Cicilline. He's been very aggressive with some of his rhetoric about the incumbent and incumbents in general, and how the party brass has kind of, run away from his way of doing business. So we're looking forward to meeting him. He's served the country well in Iraq and is now home and attempting to serve the country in another way. So we'll do that tonight. We've got lots going on. So let us go to the rundown as I welcome you into My State of Mind. There we are. The real conversation needs to be had. We've got an elevated concern about violence in the city of Providence, but I think some of the real conversation seems to be missing. I'll tell you about it. And when it comes to the mayoralty in the city of Providence, the campaign for it, it's becoming a little in your face and a little strange at the same time. So we'll explain that to you this evening. I got some timeline questions, and I think there will be more journalists and actually people running for governor who have timeline questions on Gina Raimondo's latest person in her controversial ad. Looks like this immigration challenge is coming our way in ways that might have been projected, but now are really on our doorstep. And it's that time of year. It's that time of year. This is the time of year when Danny starts paying attention to the actual game of baseball. I can't go the entire season anymore. I just don't have the space and time. Are you like that too? Well, Red Sox Nation's struggling enough. Let's get into the rundown, then we'll get to that little ditty at the back end of it. What do we got here? The real conversation. Yeah, so here's the headline. NAACP calls for this, well, a bunch of things. A summit, programming to help alleviate violence in the city of Providence. You know, that Chad Brown shooting the other day really shook the community to its core, and it should. And if there's a catalytic thing that actually causes the kind of change that people want, well, that's great. But we know that this is kind of, running uphill a little bit. Here's Todd Wallace's little take on what happened yesterday. Then we'll talk about what the real conversation really ought to be.
Alina Johnson had been outside visiting friends at the Chad Brown housing complex when she heard
pop, 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 pop. So at first, nobody even moved because we thought it was fireworks. It's around the 4th of July.
But this was no celebration.
Somebody just came and shut up the whole street.
We need help. We need help.
NAACP President Jim Vincent introduced a 5-point plan he hopes will address the community's concerns, including a summit involving city leaders and an improvement in workforce development programs. Community leader Kobe Dennis reminds this group that everyone has a responsibility.
We are looking at ourselves, all right? We are looking very closely at ourselves, and we realize that it is on us. It is on us, and I'll never stop saying that.
Look, I'm glad there's some accountability here. I think there's some real honest dialogue going on inside the Chad Brown community, if you will, inside communities, and we can say the African-American community. It's still identifiable that way. It's all of our challenges, though. But here's the thing. If we're going to get really raw and really honest about this, where's the conversation about the fatherless kids in the city of Providence? Where is that conversation? You can talk about all the programs in the world. The truth of the matter is that gang violence and gangs themselves provide a kind of leadership for young men who don't have it. So if we're going to start talking about programs and taxpayer money being spent here and there, we're going to start putting the mayor of Providence on the hot seat for more programmatical solutions and all this, I would think the NAACP and those who are taking now stock of their own neighborhoods will say something about the 5-second, 5-minute, 5-hour, 5-day, 5-week, 5-month, 5-year, 5-decade plan, short, midterm, and long-term, to bring father types into the scene. When young men are growing up and have a father that they're accountable to, it changes the whole dynamic, doesn't it? But that conversation may be too raw. I don't think there'll be any change until we get that raw. We'll have these folks in and we'll talk about it. Next item, when it comes to the city of Providence, though, excuse me scratching, there's a bold and weird thing happening. You know, Lauren Adrian, the candidate who originally was a Democrat, then moved to independent, and then bowed out. Here's the headline from yesterday. This guy bows out of the race, and He told WPRO Radio, where I hail daily, hail is kind of an overstatement, where I hang out and do the radio show from noon to 3 every day, told the newsroom about his rationale for getting out of this race.
Clear to me from the field of candidates that we had a risk, and that an unacceptable risk that Buddy could get elected. And I think that would be a terrible thing for the city of Providence. And I can eliminate about half the risk just by getting out.
So this is all about, by the way, this guy's a little cocky. Part of the bold commentary, right? Little cocky. He's going to eliminate half the risk. Well, I'm not so sure what the pollable numbers said about his, voter projections. Having said that, this is fairly bold in suggesting that the motive is to get Buddy out. And there's some ways, the Buddy Cianci thing, I don't know if the old KG veteran has been outsmarted here, because this guy, Lauren Adrian, was holding his papers to the very end as to whether he was going to file as a Democrat or an independent, and Cianci was doing the same thing. And if you remember, if you've been watching the show on a regular basis, I said this guy Adrian is making a terrible mistake if he thinks Buddy Cianci is a bad idea for the city, because getting into that independent general election environment only, purees down the field, and Buddy has to have less voters in order to be able to win the plurality, not the majority, but the plurality. Anyway, there's a lot of this anti-Buddy sentiment going. So I get an email today that identifies another candidate that's flirting with getting out, and I looked this up and I found in the New York Times, there's a headline here, this story has maybe the Republican, Dan Harrop, who we had on the show just a couple of nights ago, now talking about getting out, and I called him on the radio and found out that, in fact, yes, he's got somewhat of a potential plan for bailing.
Any candidate needs to do what's best for the city. If it were best for the city and for its election for me to withdraw, yes, I would withdraw. But that no decision on that would be made until late in the campaign, certainly not before late October, after the regular quarterly meeting of the Republican City Committee and our discussion of such. But you need to do what's best for the city. And, I would consider it if it were best for the city.
Well, here's the weird part. After September 12th or so, your name is still on the ballot. So you could say on October 16th or 20th, you know what, I'm out of here. But there'll still be, mindless dummies going to the voting booth, drawing a line for your name. And if you do that, Dan, if you get out of the race late, again, in this whole thing that we can't let Buddy win. See, the theory is if Buddy's one-on-one with a Democratic primary winner, he'll lose. That's the theory. I'm not so sure I buy into it. But let me tell you something. Don't put it past the Cianci camp to put a $50,000 ad campaign out for Dan Harrop after he gets out of the race. There'll be kids from Brown who've been hired just to stand there and hair up, and people will be walking into the booth because we're going to vote for this Harrop guy, and he'll be walking around going, "Wait a second, I'm out." Bold and weird. This race, that's how it feels to me anyway. Stay tuned. All right, next little ditty here. Timeline questions here. Just a quick note here. The Providence Journal put a story out today. The subject of the Raimondo ad got $25,000 in state victim fund. You saw this, right? The "She Saved My Life Twice" ad. This young lady compliments Gina Raimondo and suggests that the life-saving thing happened because of, in part, Gina's effort on the victim aid fund that she cleaned up as treasurer. Well, some good work by Kathy Gregg in the Providence Journal finds that, in fact, she got $25,000 from that fund. And while I don't quarrel with the number, this notion that Gina saved her life is kind of interesting. She first applied for the money years prior to her getting it. And there's correspondence that Kathy was able to unearth here that shows that she hadn't filed all the right paperwork. So this is not just Gina Raimondo coming to save the day. This lady may not have actually done all that she had to do to get that process moving. I think there'll be more conversation about this, questions from her competitors and debates, and more journalism about this ad, which has gotten a lot of attention for what I have still thought has been a pretty pretentious suggestion that there was a life-saving effort here made twice for this woman. All righty, in the next item here, you know that we've had a lot of immigration conversation in the country. We've got 50,000 plus young people who have stormed the border, getting out of Honduras and the like under this rumor that this is an easier place to go and that the judges are easy on you. Here's the latest from CBS.
Dozens of women and children arrived back in Honduras Monday in what federal officials say will be the first of a wave of deportation flights from the U.S. But with thousands of kids still in legal limbo, federal officials are trying to house some of them in states far from the U.S.-Mexico border, and resistance is spreading.
We don't want them here!
Republican Senator John Cornyn and House Democrat Henry Cuellar want to speed up the deportation process by sending at least 40 more immigration judges to border towns. Their bill calls for unaccompanied minors to have a preliminary hearing within 7 days of their arrival and to be sent home immediately if a judge rules they do not qualify for asylum or some other special status.
Yeah, right. So now we see that here at home we're starting to have some of the repercussions of this challenge. Here's a headline in the Boston Herald with the sheriff from our neighboring county here, within the sound of our broadcast, of course, Bristol County Sheriff Thomas Hodgson. He is suggesting that, guess what? He added some buses that were borrowed out of his facility to be able to get some of these people that are coming to the border, young people too. He says we're all becoming border sheriffs now with these people carting all over, and it comes all the way up the blame. So what he's saying is that some of these kids that have been down there are actually arriving in federal facilities and county facilities in Massachusetts, which means we got a serious situation going on here. And it ain't just Texas, it ain't just New Mexico, it ain't just California. All right, and finally, on a lighter note, it is All-Star Week. The Home Run Derby, late to start last night, was won by, who is it? Yohannes Cespedes from Oakland. Well, good for him on that. It's always entertaining, no doubt. But I do note that the All-Star Game, which used to be just a waste of time in a lot of ways, is very important. Remember, the league winner has the home field advantage in the World Series. So there is a rooting interest tonight. And by the way, this is the line of demarcation. I actually start paying attention to baseball after the All-Star break. The summer is just moving away. Matt Fecteau running for Congress. They'll tell you why next. You know, I said earlier that the election season feels bold and weird, at least when it comes to the Providence mayoral race. But the nice thing about this election season, we've got some young voices in it, no doubt. Here's a picture of some of the candidates we've already spoken with. There's David Cicilline, the incumbent, and Cormac Lynch and Stan Tran are the two guys on the Republican side who are running for David Cicilline's seat. But it's not often that an incumbent gets challenged from within his own party. And Matt Fecteau, Captain Matthew Fecteau from the U.S. Army, is here to tell us why you're doing that. Welcome to the broadcast. Nice to have you.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks for the service to our country.
Thank you.
We'll talk a little bit about what you think about what's going on in Iraq since you've been there coming up. But you've been pretty rough on the Democratic establishment here, haven't you?
Well, I'm increasingly disappointed with a lot of members of the Democratic establishment. I want to make this clear that as far as the members of the Democratic establishment, not everyone in the Democratic establishment I have a problem with. I have great respect and admiration for Angel Tavares, for example, and obviously President Obama, who I did work for. But there are members of the Democratic establishment who I am gravely disappointed in.
Why so much respect for Tavares?
Well, I mean, I think he inherited such a mess. He is a great guy. He's a good leader, and he's a good person.
He's also somebody, I won't quarrel, but he's also somebody who's protected the very guy that you're running against.
Well, just because I admire Angel Tavares doesn't mean I have to agree with Angel Tavares 100% on all the issues.
Well, is leadership about being truthful? I mean, the hurricane that he talked about, Category 5 hurricane financially, was delivered to him from David Cicilline, who did everything he could to hide it in the last couple of congressional runs. And nobody seemed to have the guts within the political community to say, listen, he's accountable and got away with it. So I just find it interesting that out of the blue you tell me that Tavares is an example of the establishment that you respect, while he's dodged that bullet, so to speak, and having to be accountable for a guy that he has supported for Congress.
Well, again, we're going to have some reasonable disagreements. And that's one point I disagree respectfully with Mayor Tavares with.
That's it. Okay. Well, we'll leave it there. But what is it about the culture of the party that bothers you so much?
Well, a lot of Rhode Islanders and even veterans, young veterans like myself, younger veterans like myself, they can basically say that they didn't land on Iraq. Iraq landed on them. There are few opportunities here in Rhode Island, and the economy, the state, has predominantly been run by the Democratic Party year in, year out. I'm a proud Democrat. I embrace a lot of the Democratic values. However, we can't keep electing the same political players year in, year out, expect a different outcome.
You worked for Patrick Kennedy.
I did, yes, sir.
And you admire Patrick Kennedy.
I do, yes, sir.
The Kennedy legacy is antithetical to what you're talking about.
Well, I have a bias because I did work for him. I know him, and I do think he's a fantastic guy. But I think we need some new ideas, and it might be in conflict with the Kennedy legacy, but you know, I can respectfully make my points, and if the people choose me versus Congressman Cicilline, good for them.
All right, when we come back, Matt's got a whole bunch of issues that he's posted on his website that are worthy of conversation. I do want to get a perspective since he was on the ground in Iraq, because that place is a mess again. Stay with us. Welcome back. Matt Fecteau is my guest. He's a Pawtucket young man who is running for Congress against David Cicilline and has served our nation in Iraq. Boy, this ISIS intervention is really kind of shaking everything up. All that work, all those lives, all those injuries, all of that, sometimes you wonder if it's been worth it. What's your take after having served the country there?
Wow, it's a difficult situation. We lost a lot of good soldiers over there, a lot of good people, and I hope it's worth it. I can't say it was worth it right now, but I can hope it's worth it, and all you can do is hope, and hopefully some good will come out of the situation. But it is their situation. We've invested already too many lives and too much treasure overseas in places like Iraq, and it's time for them to take care of their country.
So tell me what by the way, you wrote a pretty gut check type of column in the Providence Journal, an op-ed piece a couple of weeks ago that's probably worth looking up and reading regarding this whole matter. But what is your perspective should you win a congressional seat? What will you say about our military efforts in general and our foreign policy?
Well, we have a tendency to get involved overseas in conflicts that we really shouldn't be involved in, and we become too interventionist at times. That's a serious issue, and we end up causing more conflict when we involve and we over exceed our bounds of reasonable foreign intervention. So as far as getting involved overseas, I think we should be involved in a measured, reasonable way, and not in a sledgehammer-ish fashion as the Bush administration went into Iraq.
You might go back, huh?
There was some talk about deploying to Iraq, deploying other advisors to Iraq, yes.
How do you feel about that?
I have no qualms about it. It's not a big issue for me. You become kind of numb to the deployments. But let's be honest here, there's so few opportunities here in Rhode Island that it would be great just to have another opportunity, a job opportunity, or something that pays a reasonable wage.
That's provocative.
Well, unfortunately, the economy in Rhode Island, it's difficult for a lot of people. And a lot of people.
And for veterans coming back, right?
For veterans coming back, absolutely. And people like Congressman Cicilline, they just haven't provided any lucrative job opportunities.
What's your big bug with him?
Oh, God, there's just so many. Well, in 2011, in my article in a Providence Journal did talk about this a little bit. In 2011, one of the biggest bugs was when he stood in front of the former Paramount Card company, and he introduced his Make It in America block grant legislation, and he told us all this is going to bring jobs back to the state of Rhode Island. And the former Paramount Card company still stands to this day idle, and we still have the highest unemployment rate in the country. It's going down, but it's going down for some of the wrong reasons. People are leaving, or people are just discouraged from working. So Congressman Cicilline, he has a lot to answer for. As far as the gerrymandering of districts in 2012, I wasn't happy about that as a U.S. service member. Just because you get in trouble at the polls because of things you did as mayor of Providence, that's no reason to subvert our democratic process. And I would be a little embarrassed if I were him. In a democratic state, he has to gerrymander districts.
Well, listen, I'm going to have you back and we'll talk about more issues before the primary. Have you had a chance to debate with him? Is he playing the rope-a-dope incumbent type of role? Are you having a hard time engaging?
I am having a hard time engaging, yes. I have reached out to him a couple times with no acknowledgement. And I mean, he's a timid politician. What can I say? And if he wants to have a substantive discussion, we can have that substantive discussion. But, you know, frankly, right now he is just running scared.
I love that. I love that. So did your family or whoever. She loved that. Is that your grandma? Or
No.
She's your friend?
Just like a grandma.
Just like a grandma.
Just like a grandma.
She loved that. Did you hear that? Oh boy. Well, you know what? There's probably a lot of people watching on TV saying, oh boy. Hey, David, show this guy some respect. He served the country. Come debate some issues with him. Right?
Absolutely.
All right, come back, Matt. Good luck.
Thank you very much.
Your state of mind. Oh boy, when we come back. That was a nice moment. Matt had, an entourage here and one of his supporters. Oh boy, when he was so tough on David Cicilline. Well, take a deep breath. It's no big deal being, oh boy, tough on David Cicilline. Any incumbent that won't respect his challenger. Real quick, your state of mind. This is how you get in touch, 228-1886. Here's a voicemail that was left for us from last night's conversation about the mayoral race in Providence.
Buddy Santi was in prison, and he paid his dues, and now he's trying to run for mayor. And I think that everybody should give him a chance because I think he paid his dues, and I think he's going to be a good mayor for the city of Providence.
A tough discussion on the kneecap debacle tomorrow night, and I'll see you on the radio at noon. Have a great night.